Hello everyone, welcome to today's video on multiplying and dividing rational numbers. So this is building on what we did recently with multiplying and dividing integers. It's really the same thing. More than anything, this video is going to review how to multiply and divide fractions, which is something you learned in 6th grade, but then also applying it when we have negative fractions. So as a reminder, our key concept that we did with integers as well is that when we're multiplying and dividing rational numbers with the same sign, meaning they're both positive or they're both negative, then the product or the quotient is positive. And when we're multiplying and dividing rational numbers with different signs, then the product or quotient is going to be negative. Something that's going to be important to remember, particularly when we get into division, is that we can easily convert between multiplication and division. And the kind of key idea is that division is the same as multiplying by a number's reciprocal. So we'll get there when we get to division. All right, we're going to start with two multiplication problems first, though. When we're multiplying fractions, we have 3/4 times negative 2/3. One is positive and one is negative. Something that's going to come up is you see this in this situation, the negative sign is kind of in the numerator with the -2. That means it's a negative number because we have one negative and one positive. -2 divided by 3. They're different signs, so we're going to get a negative value. So that's going to be negative. If we have one negative sign, doesn't really matter where it shows up in the fraction, that's a negative number. Okay, so what that means then is here I have this positive, and then I am multiplying by a negative. And I guess I have to ask myself, okay, when you do that, when you do a positive times a negative, am I going to get a positive or a negative? Well, that's our rule that we're learning. We are multiplying rational numbers with two different signs. One's positive and one's negative here. Then we're going to get a negative answer, a negative product. Okay, so that means that whatever we get here, the answer is going to be, it's going to equal to a negative number. Just got to figure out what that is. Okay, so then at that point we can ignore the signs, think about the absolute value, ignore the signs, and we need to do 3/4 times 2/3. How we do this, multiplying fractions, is actually pretty easy. It's the easiest thing to do with fractions. You're just multiplying straight across. So you multiply the numerators and you multiply the denominators. And then you might have to reduce the fractions. So I'm going to do 3 times 2 to get my new numerator. And what is 3 times 2? 6. Perfect. So my numerator is going to be 6. And then for my denominator, I have 4 times 3. What is 4 times 3? That is equal to 12. Okay, so I end up with 6/12, or 6 divided by 12. That is the correct product, but it isn't in its most reduced simplified form. So what we want to do there then is we want to see, is there a common factor of both 6 and 12 that we can divide out? So yes, there is. If I think about what are my factors of 6, the factors of 6 are 1, 2, 3, and 6. And then what are the factors of 12? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and 12. Okay, so we're going to think of what's the greatest common factor of 6 and 12. That's going to be 6. So we can do 6 divided by 6 to get 1. So then we can do 12 divided by 6, which is 2. Because when we're trying to find an equivalent fraction or equivalent ratio, you have to divide or multiply the numerator and the denominator by the same thing. So then we're going to get 1/2. So that is the correct product, not 1/2, but -1/2, because we already determined this is going to be a negative number. All right, let's look at our second example. We have -1/5 times -1/6. Okay, so for this, when we're multiplying fractions, it's very easy if they're both if both fractions are either in an improper fraction form or a proper fraction. But when they're in a mixed number form, that makes it much more challenging to multiply fractions. There are a few methods, but for this video, we're just going to say the easiest thing is to convert your mixed number into an improper fraction. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. Before we do that, though, let's figure out what the sign is going to be. So here I have a negative number. I'm multiplying that by a negative number. So when I have a negative times a negative, am I going to get a positive or a negative product? Well, we have the same sign, when we have the same sign, our product is going to be positive. Okay, so that means now we can just ignore the signs. That's really the only 7th grade skill, is figuring out whether that's going to be positive or negative. So good. Now we can ignore those signs, just think of them as positive. And I have 1/5 times 1 1/6. Okay, so how do we convert 1 1/6 into an improper fraction? So what you're going to do is you're going to take this 1, the number out front, and multiply it by our denominator, 6. So we do 1 times 6, 6. Okay, and then you have to add the numerator to get 7. And then that 7 becomes your new numerator, and you keep the denominator of 6. So 1 1/6 is equal to 7/6. Alright, so now you should know what to do from here. I have 1/5 times 7/6. We will just multiply straight across. So for my numerators, I have 1 times 7. And for my denominator, I have 5 times 6. Okay, so figure out for me, what do we get then when we do 1 times 7 divided by 5 times 6, keeping it in fraction form? Yeah, 1 times 7 is 7, and then 5 times 6 is 30. So 1/5 times 7/6 is equal to 7/30. You cannot reduce that any further. The only factors of 7 are 1 and 7, and 7 is not a factor of 30, so you can't reduce it any further. Go back to my original problem. So that then is going to be equal to positive 7/30. Because like we said, when we have the same sign and we're multiplying, our product is going to be positive. Alright, great. Now we're going to go into division, which is going to involve the same kind of idea. Okay, and now we have question 3, which is going to be a division question, dividing fractions. I have 3/4 divided by negative 7/8. Okay, so like before, our first thing we're going to do is let's just figure out, is our quotient in this case, because it's a division problem, is our quotient going to be positive or negative? Yeah, I get a negative quotient, because when I have different signs, then my quotient or product is going to be negative whenever I'm multiplying or dividing. Okay, so whatever my answer is, whatever that quotient is, there's going to be a negative sign up front. Once I've done that, I can just not really worry about the negatives anymore and just think, go back to the 6th grade and remember, okay, how did I divide fractions? So I know most of my students learned a mnemonic device in 6th grade for dividing fractions, keep, change, flip. I want to talk about what keep, change, flip is. It's not something that I use much in my vocabulary. I'm going to try to push you to the 7th grade strong math vocabulary, but it is a good rule that you can remember, and I think a lot of you still do remember about how we divide fractions. So just like we said that subtraction was the same as adding the opposite, the reason it works out that way is subtraction and addition, those are inverse operations. They're closely related. And the additive inverse is the same thing as the opposite. Okay, so now we have this new version. We have division is the same as multiplying by the reciprocal. The reciprocal is the flip, and it's also called the multiplicative inverse. Okay, so this is our new version, our 7th grade language for keep, change, flip. When we're dividing, that is the same as multiplying, so we're changing division into multiplication, and then by the reciprocal or by the flip, when you flip the numerator and the denominator. Okay, so let's see what this looks like in practice. Keep was that first thing. You're not doing anything to 3/4. That's the beginning. We haven't gotten to the operation yet. So we have 3/4, and then we need to change division into multiplication. And then that's the same, only I can only do that if I multiply by the reciprocal of the number that I have, or I flip it. That's the flip part. So the reciprocal of 7/8 is 8 over 7, or 8 divided by 7. So now we're going to do just like we did in our multiplication problems. We're going to multiply straight across. So we have 3 times 8. 3 times 8, that is equal to 24. Then we have 4 times 7. 4 times 7 is equal to 28. And then we can see if we can reduce those at all. So we can actually divide both 24 divided by 4 and 28 divided by 4, because 4 is a common factor of both 24 and 28, and that's going to give us a reduced form. So 24 divided by 4 is 6. 28 divided by 4 is 7. Okay, so that means that 3/4 divided by 7/8 is equal to 6/7. Thus, the answer to our original question, 3/4 divided by -7/8, is -6/7. So the key idea there is remembering that division is the same as multiplying by the reciprocal. So I could go from this stage to this stage just fine. For example 4, we have -1/2 divided by -3. So here I have a negative divided by a negative. When I'm dividing numbers with the same sign, like I am here, then is my quotient positive or negative? Yep, positive, exactly. Same sign means we have a positive value. So at this point, then I can just ignore these negative signs. We can go back to 6th grade world. Don't care. We've already taken care of all the 7th grade stuff. Okay, so for converting this now into multiplication by using the fact that division is the same as multiplying by the reciprocal. So that's what we're going to do here. Again, this is keep, change, flip. Okay, so I'm keeping 1/2. And now I need to change division into multiplication by the reciprocal of the number. Okay, so I'm changing this division into multiplication. And then I need to figure out what is the reciprocal of 3. Okay, that's a little complicated because when we think about the reciprocal or the flip, that means you're switching the numerator and the denominator. However, it looks like how we've currently written 3, that there is no fraction, there is no denominator. Any rational number can be written as a fraction. An integer is a rational number. So we can write 3, that is the same thing as 3 divided by 1. Okay, if you want to convert from a whole number to a fraction, you can always just take that whole number and put it over 1, because any number divided by 1 is equal to what we started with. So now I have 3 is equivalent to 3 divided by 1, or 3 over 1. So what is the reciprocal, or the flip, we don't use that word in 7th grade, of 3? Yep, it's 1/3. Great. Okay, so 1/2 divided by 3 is the same thing as 1/2 times 1/3. Okay, dividing by 3 is the same thing as multiplying by 1/3. Why? Because division is the same as multiplying by a number's reciprocal. Awesome. Now, last thing, we need to multiply these fractions. I get 1/6 as my quotient to 1/2 divided by 3, which is also the product of 1/2 times 1/3. Thus, what's my final answer here? -1/2 divided by -3 is equal to +1/6. Great! Good job, everyone!